Thank you very much, everybody, for coming back. As I said, lunch is coming up, and it will be a bigger break. So hang in there, and thank you for staying with us. I guess our next session will be with Guide Dogs New South Wales, who are going to be speaking about orientation and mobility in the workplace. As I mentioned, not all people who are blind or vision impaired may need to use a cane or a guide dog. There's a lot of different circumstances around that. So with that in mind, I would like to introduce from Guide Dogs, let me get my notes here. Sorry about that. Gina Whelan, Doug Ritchie, and Gavan Harrison. So welcome to the three of you. And if you would like to unmute yourselves and present to our audience.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm just trying to see where I can share my screen for you. No. Start video. One moment. Hey. Hi, everyone. It's been very interesting listening to everyone this morning. Thank you for your invite to be part of the symposium today. My name's Gina Whelan. I'm an orientation and mobility specialist and have been for the past 25 years, 20 of those working for Guide Dogs here in Sydney, Australia. So most people know me as an O&M, so that's orientation mobility specialist. We help people that have a vision impairment or are blind to get around safely. So you may see people with a variety of different size canes moving around. Well, that's the job that I do. I'm very aware of our limited time with you today, so this will be a very brief overview of what we do and how we do it. So I'll get one of my colleagues to post our Guide Dogs contacts details in the chat function for more in-depth information for you to dip into later. So if you wanted to jot something down or go in the chat, I'll get one of my colleagues to put that in, as I said, but the telephone number for our services are 1800 484 333 or nsw.guidedogs.com.au. So Guide Dogs provide a range of services to provide greater independence in a variety of aspects of day-to-day life, such as providing guide dogs, O&M services, assistive technology to assist carrying out everyday tasks that people will need with a vision impairment, such as education and employment. Importantly, as mentioned before by some of the other guest speakers, these services are at no cost to the client or the employer. Such as job access, the employee will know of what's available to them. If not, Guide Dogs can support and point them in the right direction. And I think it's quite important to mention money, so people are quite scared about thinking about, oh, is this going to cost me anything? So if you can bring that up quite early on in the job sort of negotiation, I think that's quite an important point for employees to know. As I said, I've worked as an O&M for the past 25 years, where I would work with someone with a vision impairment to travel to where they want to go with more confidence, ease and safety, including the workplace. For example, I've worked with many people with vision impairment starting new jobs or work placements. I'm in fact waiting on a call for someone to get back to me to book in for their new work placement. So I would meet with the person or chat with them on the phone, find out where their new workplace would be, research the details of what's involved, how they get there from home to the new employment place, and offer a variety of potential travel routes options to get them back to and forth. And then discuss what they think about that. So we always do a plan B. So that might be a variety of buses. It would include buses, trains, ferries, road crossings, office layout, the person's desk, kitchen, toilet, fire escapes in the workplace. So very, very basic, but all these things are the associated tasks of what someone with a vision impairment would need to have ticked off for them to actually do the job. So we would take all that stress out before the person actually starts. So when the start date arrives, the person can actually get on with the job and the employer can see the person and not the vision impairment. In my experience working with employers, many times they've mentioned basic things like, off the cuff, how will someone with a vision impairment read the computer? How will they see where they're going and not bumping into things? What will they need? Adaptions, will they need a ramp, or will they need this, that and the other? My suggestion is just ask the person. They will let you know what they need, as they're the expert in being them, of what they're going to need to do the job. And really, the person wouldn't be putting themselves forward for the job in the first place if they didn't think they could do it. I'll now pass on to my colleague, Doug Ritchie, who will talk to you a little bit about having a guide dog, as he's a guide dog instructor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gina. I hope you can all hear me okay. And a big thank you goes out to the BCA for hosting this conference, and likewise to all delegates for attending. I am a guide dog mobility instructor. I have been doing it for a number of years, as you can see by the haggard look in my face. But I really do want to stress early on how important it is, the connection between employers, new employees, and the guide dog organisations throughout Australia. In preparing the workplace for the arrival of a guide dog user, good communication is, as I said, really of absolute paramount importance for the employee and the employer. The trail of communication usually starts with a referral coming from the guide dog user to the local guide dog office, requesting assistance in orientation to a new workplace. As I said, the guide dog user contacts guide dogs, whichever guide dog school they are under, and requests the services of a guide dog mobility instructor, or, in the absence of a guide dog mobility instructor, an orientation and mobility specialist. The GDMI will scope out the new workplace prior to the involvement of the guide dog user to try and gain an understanding of the volume and complexity of the work that will be carried out. This will include looking at the available transport options for said client and the safest and most direct route from the individual's home to work and return. The employee will then contact the workplace and inform you guys, the employers, of their need to access all areas within the building that they will require in order to carry out their new role. Once this has been done, the guide dog mobility instructor and employee will work together to start the orientation process. As Gina has already outlined, this usually involves the immediate workspace, meeting rooms, entry and exit points, location of stairs, lifts, kitchen, eating areas, and importantly, an appropriate external area for the guide dog to be toileted at regular intervals. And generally that's tea, coffee breaks in the morning, one in the afternoon, and at lunchtime. It is our aim to have the new employee fully independent within the workplace well in advance of their proposed starting date. This saves stress from your perspective as well as from the client's perspective. Once in place, an individual's role may change, and often does, and they may require more assistance, possibly to a new location, or when a conference takes place away from the workplace. This is where Guide Dogs New South Wales can step in. We're always available to repeat the process of orientating the handler and dog to this new environment. Now, having a dog, as Gina mentioned, at your workplace costs your company nothing. There are no costs to the employer for any of the initial or ongoing services provided by Guide Dogs New South Wales. It's the guide dog user's responsibility to provide bedding, water bowls, etc. It is an expectation that every guide dog user will be well versed in their responsibilities to ensure that the dog is clean, quiet, and out of the way during working hours. Generally, a dog will create its own routine throughout the day, and that comes about in time, and will spend lengthy periods sleeping and relaxing on their beds, lucky buggers. if not required to guide their owners through the office. Again, that varies. The amount of work the dog would do throughout an office space or a business space is entirely up to the guide dog user to decide. So the importance of having a dog with good social behavior is heavily reinforced during the training of dog and client. At no time will the dog remain off leash, and it usually will have its bed under the owner's desk or within easy reach of the user. At all times, it should be out of the way of fellow employees. And I suppose that's the reason we do that is so that the dog can settle, and probably with the staff can settle. The dog will know that once it's on its bed, it won't be touched, it won't be interfered with, and it can get a good 4 or 5 hours of Zeds. In summing up, having a guide dog in the office can provide a lot of joy and creates a lot of interest for all, but not for everyone. So it's really good to forewarn your staff of the impending arrival of a guide dog in the office, so that if other staff members are wary of dogs, are allergic to dog hair, or have certain religious beliefs that may mean being exposed to them will cause anxiety, alternative solutions can be discussed. And that is a really important point, I think. To fully succeed in transitioning a guide dog into the workplace, both dog and handler have to feel relaxed and welcomed. So knowing your ground rules for everyone is important. So it's our intention to ensure that your organization has at its fingertips all the information required to make this transition seamless. With this in mind, we offer general advice on the, I suppose you'd call it the do's and the don'ts, the ground rules, and both the GDMI, Guide Dog Mobility Instructor, and the guide dog user can lead this discussion should it be required. Or we can arrange for more in-depth staff training, teaching fellow staff members how to effectively guide a person with a vision impairment. Yeah, and I think I'd like just to kind of close off by stressing that it is very different for each and every individual who is coming to a new workplace, and what I have just stated will change, but those are generally the ground rules that we would adhere to and the process within which we would work. Thank you all very much for your time. It's been a very quick presentation. We've got, I'll hand you over to Gavan Harrison and his guide dog Tippy, who is just a delight, a little black Labrador. And it's Gavan's third dog, I think, Gavan, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right, Doug.
Yeah, she's a cracker. Is there any way we can get her on screen for those?
Probably not. I'd have to try and work out how to point the camera at her, so we might give that a miss. Okay, well, thanks, Doug, and thanks, Gina, for providing the groundwork for that, and thank you to BCA for this, what I think is a really important and great initiative. So as Doug mentioned, I am a guide dog user. I'm also working at Guide Dogs New South Wales ACT in the client connections and engagement area. But just to give a little bit of background on my journey and myself, I have a condition called retinitis pigmentosa, which is a degenerative eye condition. So I have gone from having some vision when I was quite reasonable vision when I was younger to having deteriorating vision over time. And my first part of my career was as a research scientist, having done a PhD, and I worked in that area for quite some time before I got to the point where the vision that I had was no longer really suitable for the type of work I was doing. So I was looking for other work that I could still leverage that knowledge and experience that I'd gained through the study and research that I had done. And I applied for a job at the Australian affiliate of a large multinational pharmaceutical company. And I think they recognized the fact that I had a good skill set, had acquired that, and that would really fit well with what they were wanting within their organization. So you know, they gave me the opportunity to work in that role, and in that the interview process, I did disclose that I had a vision impairment. At that stage, it was not too bad. I was still able to function quite well visually, but I did flag the fact that my vision was deteriorating. So I remember when I was offered the job, the director of the division I was working in said to me that I was the first vision impaired person that the organisation had employed, and that was really going to be a learning experience for them as an organisation as well. So that was a great sort of introduction, and I really, you know, got the sense from that I was going into an organisation that was open to having someone who was vision impaired or blind, and that's was something that, you know, really made me comfortable going into that organisation. So but what I want to really talk about here is the experience of having guide dogs as an organisation help me establish myself in the role. So in order to be able to sort of work at that organisation, I obviously had to get there each day, and that involved two trains and a bus for me. I was there for 10 years, and during that time, the company moved sites, so I had to learn how to get to a new site. So at each step of the way, I was able to contact guide dogs, and where I needed to get someone just to help me to become familiar with the route, look at things like where was the best place to do road crossings, sort of how to sort of get all the forms of public transport that I required. So that was something where I think, as Gina mentioned, that sort of part of the jigsaw puzzle could just be taken out, you know, and made it much more easy for me to solve that with the help of guide dogs. Also, once I was at the new workplace, just being able to become familiar with where everything was, and as Doug mentioned, sort of get some information out to staff that was helpful for them to understand, where I had a guide dog, what the expectations around etiquette for guide dogs were, how to interact with the person rather than the guide dog, was really helpful for me to go into that organisation and not have to worry about continually having, you know, conversations where people were interested in what I, you know, having a guide dog and how I was able to get around with the guide dog. But always happy to have those conversations, but just at a big picture level for the, you know, all staff to get that understanding of what it was like to be working with a guide dog, and what, I guess, how they could interact with me more effectively. That was really helpful. And also, yeah, I mean, just having, you know, a guide dog on site, which helped me get around on a day-to-day basis, I always felt was a really positive thing for the organisation. It really put a smile on people's face that, you know, when they saw me getting around, and saw my dog, and, you know, knowing that although they couldn't sort of pat the dog or interact with the dog so much, they were just always really happy to see the dog there in the workplace. And also on a day-to-day basis, I guess, what it was like, or what it should be like, to have a guide dog in a workplace. Most of the time, my guide dog is with me, helping me get around. She would go to all the meetings I would go to. I've got a place for her under my desk, and as I think others have mentioned, it's helpful to have a static desk where I can set things up for the dog and for myself. But most of the time, you know, she'll be under the bed. You wouldn't even know she's there. She's very quiet. But when I need her, I can get her out to help me get around. Sometimes I might need to leave her there, where I'll need to go off and perhaps go to a certain meeting or something. And generally, she'll just, you know, she's very quiet. She'll just mostly be sleeping. I will need to take her out during the day for toilet breaks every now and again, but otherwise, she's you know, when I'm getting around, she's visible in the respect, you know, she's a dog and she's beautiful, so people are always admiring her. But otherwise, she's really a mobility aid for me. and having a very low impact on the work environment. So hopefully that just gives you a bit of an idea of what it's like coming into a new organisation and how guide dogs can help in that process. So thank you, BCA, for giving us the opportunity to provide the information.
Thank you so much, Gavan. And I'd just like to thank Guide Dogs New South Wales ACT for their time today and for sharing that, because it is useful information, and it's not necessarily information anybody would come across unless the situation presents itself. So I would really like to thank the three of you for your time today and for your information. Okay, so with that, moving on to our next section, just before lunchtime. We have quantum technology. Now, quantum technology, as they will explain themselves, are a assistive technology provider and outlet to Australia. So I would like to introduce Rebecca Clark and Peter Cracknell from Quantum to speak about assistive technology in the workplace, what kinds of gadgets and things are available that can then be funded potentially by job access and things like that. So Rebecca, Peter, welcome.
Okay, thanks, Conor. And thank you to BCA for the opportunity to talk and tell you a bit about Quantum and how we can help in terms of assistive technology and the process for getting that in the workplace. So I'm Rebecca Clark and I'm a vision technology specialist from Quantum Reading Learning Vision, and I'm joined today by my colleagues. We have got Peter Cracknell, who's a manager and product specialist in our Queensland office, and we've also got Daniel Keogh online, who's our access technology support specialist, so does our technology support, and he's blind himself, so he does also use the technology. So I'm going to give a bit of an introduction as to who we are and how we can help both the employers and employees with a vision impairment or who are blind with assistive technology within the workplace. And then Danny and Peter are going to discuss and demonstrate a few examples of the technology that people may use so that they can do their day-to-day work tasks and get the work done that they need to. So who are Quantum? We're an assistive technology company providing products and services to people with a so-called print disability. So as well as people that are blind or vision impaired, that might include people that can't read for other reasons, be it stroke or we've had some people with cerebral palsy, MS, or all sorts of things. So and we've been operating for over 35 years. We're now a fully owned subsidiary of Vision Australia, but we do operate slightly separately. So we work with other organisations like Guide Dogs and other agencies as well as individuals. So we're a national company and we've got 9 consultants now that can work with people spread around the country. We've got offices here in Sydney where I am, in Brisbane, also in Melbourne. We've got one in southern Sydney, but we've also got consultants in Adelaide and in northern and southern Queensland, and we help people in Tasmania and Western Australia and Northern Territory as well. So we can look after you hopefully wherever you are. And particularly with COVID, it's expanded our ability to get around and be able to realise we can help people at a bit of a further distance than normally. So how do we help? Well, we can help by talking to potential employees and employers and help with trialling the equipment that we have. So we've got, as Peter and Daniel talk about, we've got anything from lighting and your basic handheld magnifiers right through to braille devices. So we can cover the whole spectrum of whatever your vision loss may be. So whether that might be a joint appointment with an OT or your workplace assessor and yourself as the client in the workplace, we can go through what the job tasks might be, your vision impairment and the kind of things that might be able to help, so we can bring out a range of technology. Or it might be that we send some equipment out, you might already have an idea of the kinds of equipment you might use already in the home, and therefore might need something similar in the workplace to do your tasks. So we can, after employment, we can also potentially help with setup and training as required. Particularly, you know, I've done, and I know Peter has done, and Danny done training with the JAWS screen reader software. And we can also work with your IT departments if you need to trial the software in the first place to make sure it's going to work on your systems, and get that up and running. So we do have trial codes for things like JAWS and Zoom Text and other software. So I guess we also do software support, and that's Danny's major role is via telephone, or whether that's you know, virtually face to face. And I guess our focus is supporting you as an employee and the employer, so that you can find the right technology solutions in order to be able to do your daily work tasks, you know, whatever that might be. So we can be contacted on 1300 883 853 or info@quantumrlv.com.au. I think Cheryl had a brochure from us that's got some more information for the employers out there. So I will now hand over to Danny to go through some of the technology that we have and that he uses in the workplace as well. So Danny, I'll mute myself.
No worries. Thanks, Beck. So I'm going to take just a few minutes here because I am aware that we sort of have to, you know, keep an eye on time and all that sort of stuff. I'm going to take a few minutes here to look at some of the technology that somebody like myself who has no usable vision. I am 100% totally blind, and we're actually a rarity for people who don't know. In the blindness community, people who are 100% blind is actually quite rare. But what I'm looking at here today is stuff that if you have not got enough usable vision to use the screen on a computer properly, then this is the sort of thing that you would be after to actually look at. And what I'm talking about is screen readers. So some of you would already be aware of this. There's probably some of you who aren't. What is a screen reader? I'm going to start back from absolute basics. A screen reader is a piece of software or a program or an app, if you'd like to use the modern term for it. And in this case, we're talking about Windows computers that is installed onto your computer that will read out any changes that appear on the screen with artificial speech. Now, that's an incredibly simplified explanation as to what a screen reader does. They're actually, in terms of how they do it and sort of how all of that stuff works behind the scenes, is actually quite complex. But that will sort of give you a really rough idea of what these things do. So with screen readers, the one that we'll be concentrating on today is one called JAWS, and this is for Windows. There are other ones obviously for Windows. There's other ones for Mac. You can get them on Android devices. They're on
anything on the screen.
Apple devices.
It's Cheryl here. Sorry to interrupt. Could you please turn your screen on?
Oh, okay. I will be doing some screen sharing in a sec, but I'll put video on for now.
Thank you.
Okay, that better?
Yep, if you could just tilt it down a little bit, it's sort of facing the ceiling.
How's that?
No, a little bit more. A little bit more. That's a bit better. We can see the screen now.
That's a bit better. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I will actually be doing some screen sharing anyway shortly.
Oh, okay.
So,
thanks.
That's all right. That's all right. My apologies for that. Okay, where was I? Yep. Okay. So the one that we'll be talking about today is called JAWS, which actually is an acronym for Job Access with Speech. It is the most commonly used screen reader, certainly for Windows, in the workplace. Now, as I said, there are other alternatives, but for workplace stuff, JAWS is the most commonly used one. Now, what I will do is stop that video for a second. I'm going to just demonstrate a couple of things. Just some basic getting around and a couple of the features that I actually find useful and use quite a lot of. So just bear with me for a second. Now, when I'm about to share my screen. When this comes on, you're going to hear some extremely fast speech coming through. Now, is that coming through?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. So.
Not a problem. All right. For people like...
Yes, it is.
Yep, okay, that's fine. So for people like myself who've been using screen readers for a long time, and in my case, the first time I used a talking computer was 1983, you will find that a lot of us have fairly fast speech enabled, and it's fairly robotic. And the reason for that is because even though this particular speech synthesizer that I'm using here, look, it doesn't sound that great, but it's very, very intelligible at high speeds. What I am going to do is to disable alerts. Otherwise, every time somebody joins or leaves the meeting, I'm going to get notifications coming through. What I will do for people who aren't able to listen to speech at that sort of level,
select the voice profile, default end, webinar. Meeting controls.
Is to go to something a little bit more intelligible. So, yours has some intelligence built into it. And what I mean by that is it won't read every single thing that comes on the screen. Now, you don't want the clock automatically reading every time it changes. You know, if something else changes somewhere else that's completely irrelevant, you don't want everything changed. You don't want, if any alerts come up on the screen somewhere, you may not necessarily want those to be read. So there is a lot of intelligence built in there as to what it does and does not read. And you have all sorts of controls to actually tell it what you do and don't want read. So let's just do a little basic getting around. So we'll go to the desktop.
Windows.
And the speech is being interrupted. I'm interrupting that by using what I call the shut up key, which is the control key. So if you press that, basically that is a temporary silence. So it stops JAWS until it has to speak again. So at the moment, I'm just sitting on my work computer's desktop. I can just hit the down arrow key.
Next right.
Sorry, make that the up arrow key.
Learning management system, keys, SharePoint document management, Salesforce.
And just go through the icons, whatever's on my desktop, and it reads it out to me as it goes. And also and if I wanted to go into any of these, all I would need to do is hit enter. Now, with things like this, JAWS relies heavily on keyboard usage. Most of what you'll be doing, if you are using a screen reader, a lot of what you do is not actually using specific JAWS keyboard commands, although there are a lot of those. And they're used for things like interrogating the screen to try and find out what's actually happening, what's going on. For example, if I'm not sure where I am, I can just go
Desktop 1.
That tells me where I am, what window is currently open. And in this case, it's desktop 1. You can do that anywhere. There's all types of things you can do, get it to read out current line, all of that type of thing. Now, two of the features that I want to have a look at, actually it's really one feature, but there's a couple of ways it can be used, is a lot of my job involves helping people out with different things that might be going wrong, such as error messages, any of that sort of thing that come up. And one of the ways that I get notified by that, especially by corporate companies, is by them sending me screenshots. So a screenshot is basically a captured image of what the screen currently has on it. So that might be an error message or something along those lines. JAWS can't read those by default. You can't read a graphic. You might look at it and say, yeah, but there's text in there, but there isn't text. What you're looking at is a picture of text. So if I go...
Meeting control, C colon back, C, smartphone etiquette, screen.
Okay, so I have a screenshot here.
Enter. Screenshot.png photos, screenshot.png.
So that's opened it up in the photo viewer. What we have on the screen here for people who can't see it is basically I've screenshotted a window with Notepad with some text in it. So did that earlier today. Now, if I use my arrow keys, can't read that, don't know what's going on. If I try and read the whole screen.
Photos, window, main page, group, see all photos, button, screenshot.png, app bar.
No, we can't read that either. No way of reading it. All right, so let's close this.
Alt F4, see.
If we go into what I call the context menu, or as mouse users would know it, the right-click menu.
Applications,
we have some options in here. If I go down.
Edit, print, picture smart, convenient OCR to Word with JAWS.
Convenient OCR to Word with JAWS, and we also have
convenient OCR with JAWS.
Convenient OCR with JAWS. Now, OCR stands for optical character recognition. What it basically does is look at a picture. How it gets that picture is irrelevant. So it might be somebody's taken a photo of a piece of paper. It might be a screenshot like this is. It could be anything. Where the picture comes from doesn't matter. The fact is you have a picture with some text in it. What that software will then try and do is find the text and put it into a form that's actually usable. So if I hit enter at this point, now I am going to interrupt the speech again because otherwise it's just going to read out where we were before.
Enter, leaving.
Give it a couple of seconds. And just my luck.
See meet Zoom screenshot dash OCR.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay, so basically what it's done there is what it should have done, and it didn't do, was to automatically put me into the window, but it didn't do that. Okay, so we do actually have it open. So what I have open in front of me now is a window where the screen has been recognized. I can move around that window and have a look and see exactly what it says.
File untitled dash notepad at X. File edit format view help.
So there's the menu bar and notepad, so it's recognized that.
This is a test of the JAWS convenient OCR function, capital A.
We now have the text that I wrote underneath that.
LN1, :1 100% Windows left parent CRL left right parent UTF-8.
And what it's done there is that's just the bottom of the window. So that's just your status line with all different sorts of other bits of information. There is more in here as well. And that sort of gives you basically the rest of the screen. When you do this, when you screenshot this way, and there are programs, there are ways around it where you can actually tell it not to do this. But in this case, doing it the basic one that's built into Windows, it actually takes the entire screen. So that's how I deal with screenshots. And that's something that I do most days. Now, JAWS will work fine with the Microsoft suite, so your Microsoft Word, Excel, Outlook, all of that sort of stuff. You can read emails. Unfortunately, I can't really demonstrate that as most of what I get is confidential. So there's not really any way I can sort of demonstrate that particular side of it. Excel can certainly be done. The Excel support is excellent, even to the point of being able to get information from graphs, all of that sort of thing. Before we move on to something to briefly talk about, what if sometimes, and this is especially true in the workplace, sometimes you're going to run into an application where it does not cooperate. It doesn't work for whatever reason. Maybe there's not enough keyboard support in the particular application that you're looking at. Maybe it just doesn't read things the way it should, whatever the case is. JAWS has built in what they call a scripting language, which is basically a way of programming JAWS to get it to work in situations where it doesn't normally work. Now, I'm throwing a little bit of information out there on this one. There are people who specialize in doing this. Quantum does not, but we are able to put you on to people who do. And the main one that we send this sort of work to is a guy here in Melbourne called Michael Williams. And if you ever do need his details, we can certainly put you onto him, not a problem at all. And that's what he does as a business. Doing stuff like that, scripting JAWS, workplace assessments, all of that type of thing is exactly what he does. And that can all be done through job access funding as well. The last thing to talk about, and
see call meeting controls. Meeting control.
Okay, so I've stopped the screen share. Peter, if you're handy with the Braille display at all.
Yes, I am, Danny.
Okay. If you want to throw some video on, I'll just give a really brief sort of. So, one of the other tools that blind users have access to, obviously, one of the other things is Braille. So, we do have, and again, there are multiple models of these sort of scattered all, but they all work fairly similarly. We do have also what is called a Braille display.
Sorry, Danny, we're just getting quite a bit of background noise over. I don't know if it's your feed or someone else's feed. If we could try and minimize that. Thank you. I think that's worked. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Not a problem.
Continue. We have a couple of minutes before we need to go to lunch. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, don't think it's mine because it doesn't matter. So what Peter has there is basically a Braille display. So what we have, Braille, as a lot of some people would know, is made up of groups of 6 dots. So a Braille display is generally single line. It is a piece of equipment that has little pins that actually pop up to give you the actual Braille characters. They will work most screen readers. They do need in most cases a screen reader to work. So programs like JAWS are actually aware of those displays, and if you have one connected, you will actually get some useful information off that as well. Again, that is something that I have here. Don't use it all the time, but it is something that's incredibly useful, especially if I'm on the phone. I can read Braille and sort of listen to other phone calls at the same time. Look, it looks like I had far too much to talk about, and I'm really aware of time. So what I'll do at this point is I'll hand over to Peter, and he's going to talk about some low vision stuff that we have available. I didn't get in through anywhere near as much of the stuff as I actually had written down. I've overestimated things again. So Peter, over to you.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you.
So Peter, just to let you know, Peter, we do have about 5 minutes before our scheduled lunch. So just to give you a heads up.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, there is a bit of an echo. So just to let you know, just must be the room that you're in. But yeah, anyway.
Okay. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the low vision equipment. Of course, low vision would be the larger number of people with a vision impairment. But there's a range of technologies, including screen readers, but also electronic magnifiers that can help people with their everyday working materials, both on the computer, that's digital materials, and paper materials as well. So, for example, and I'm just going to turn the camera a little bit to the side. On a computer, a normal computer, of course, that may be too small for a person with low vision to operate. So we have software that can magnify the screen. Now, I've also got this computer connected to the larger screen, so it may be easier to see. So at the moment, I don't have magnification running on this screen, but by using a program called Fusion, and Fusion is a combination of the JAWS screen reader program and the Zoom text electronic magnifier program. So with the Fusion program, we can magnify and speak whatever's on the computer screen. So at the moment, I'm looking at a spreadsheet here at about 3.5 times magnification. I can make that very, very large. So we would have some people using it up there at around about the 6 times. When we go beyond about the 6 times magnification, most people would be transitioning to JAWS, the speech, rather than relying on vision. But here you can see the basic operation is to magnify everything on the computer screen, but we can also change the color backgrounds for people who have glare issues. We can change the mouse pointer. And very importantly, even at large magnification, the highlight rectangle will track whatever you're typing. So if I'm typing figures into a spreadsheet, the Fusion program takes care of tracking the movement. So I never need to worry about chasing that with a mouse. It does it automatically for me. Some of our screens are actually not just computer screens, but they actually combine cameras as well. So at the back of this, this is called the Clearview Flex screen, we actually have a camera which can be switched to look at reading material under the screen. So I'm just going to use the control to switch the screen. Bear with me a moment. And so what's going to happen now is that on the other, now the material that I'm actually looking at is actually underneath the screen. So the computer screen can double as a large screen for computer work and also as a display for paperwork. So this way we can maximize the equipment we have on our limited desk space. So this is called the Clearview Flex. It allows us to use both magnification of paperwork or other objects and also link it up to a computer for magnification too. This arrangement of computers plus electronic magnifiers is very common for people with low vision in the workplace. We also have smaller devices. So we have very portable devices that can be used around anywhere in the office, or slightly larger devices with 12-inch screens that can be used in meetings and so on. And this one actually has a distance camera to be able to look at the presenter or the overhead PowerPoint presentation in the meeting. And just finally, and very briefly, we also have portable reading technology. So Danny's talked about being able to use the JAWS program on a computer, but many people need to be able to have materials read out loud anywhere. We have devices like the ORCAM, which is a small scanner that speaks out loud as well.
Device C5229 connected.
And the idea is that the person can take this very small, it's about the size of a marker pen. They can take it with them anywhere, and anything that's printed, including digital materials, you simply aim the ORCAM at the materials.
Came to me, getting fitted, Lurkwood Shuring, Ryan Nathan, the hog spoiled fellow on ZCK Robinson's chat.
Though that may not have come across clearly with the echo here, that gives you an indication of just how fast scanners can be and how convenient they can be. One of the advantages of this kind of device is it's not internet connected, and you may think, well, that's a disadvantage. It's actually an advantage in secure environments. We have a number of workplaces which obviously they don't want you to be able to photograph, scan or record customer information. And so devices like this that are not capable of storing information but really read out loud can mean that they can cope with those security and privacy concerns. So as, just to wrap up very, very quickly, we're a technology company, but we work in collaboration with agencies, with orientation mobility, with job access, to provide equipment and our expertise so that we can enable people to be productive in the workplace. I'll hand over now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. And
Conor, Cheryl here. Sorry to interrupt. We've had a couple of questions come through. As we have a bit of time, would it be okay if we ask a couple of questions before we go to lunch? So I guess for Peter and Rebecca from Quantum Technology, one of the questions was about a new employee who's starting who may not have used technology before, or they're not sure what sort of adaptive technology they need in the workplace. How do you actually assist employers? Are you able to maybe offer some equipment for trial or something like that?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, sorry, Peter, did you? Yeah, I can answer that. Yeah, we could certainly, depending on the location, but we can either be it a visit to the workplace and take equipment, or people can come to our showrooms, or we can potentially send, after having a bit of a conversation about, you know, whether it's likely to be Zoom text or JAWS, depending on, or magnification versus Braille, we can, trial equipment for things like the JAWS and Fusion, and we do have some codes that let people use the software for 45 days if they're trialing it in somewhere like a workplace, so they can get an idea and also do some training. I mean, for quite often for JAWS users, they might have used it at school or uni or whatever. So it's relatively unusual for people to be going from scratch, but it does happen. I mean, yeah, the first thing is, as Danny was explaining, a lot of it's keyboard use. So would be, you know, if they're not already touch typists, trying to work on that. But and we have programs to help with that as well. But yeah, we can certainly help with trialing and working out what's the best option, and yeah, loaning equipment to try for sure.
Great. And the other question was, do you come out to employer workplaces and help set up all the equipment and help the employee use the equipment or get used to using it?
Yes. Yep. Sorry, Peter, I'll let you go.
Yeah, no, we certainly do. We can do that certainly in our metropolitan areas, of course. But I personally have travelled from Brisbane to Adelaide to set up and train. We will do that as required. So if we have specialist expertise that can't be sourced locally, we can certainly step in and do that. So we will work with the IT and with the employer to make sure that it's set up in an ergonomic way, and that it works with the employer's systems as well.
Fantastic. I think they're the only two questions that have been sent through to me. I'll let Conor maybe ask if anyone else has any questions before lunch. Just to let everyone know that we do have some information from Quantum Technology and guide dogs, which I will be sending out to all participants today at the end of the symposium.
Hi, Cheryl. Yeah, I'm happy to do whatever you think is best if there is any questions from the audience. Otherwise, yeah, maybe we could go to lunch and give people a bit of a good break.
We do have one question. Gina Whelan has her hand up. Gina, did you have a question?
No. I was just saying thumbs up to the share of the information.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't think there's anyone else. I'll just check the screen. No one else has any questions.